how to make the levain for your sourdough. So you should do this the day before. This is my starter. There's active starter. And then I'm scaling water into it. Okay, and I'm going to add my flour. Okay, this can double in size after fermentation, to make sure that your container is large enough. Okay, leave this at room temperature for about 12 to 18 hours at room temperature. Okay, this is what I just mixed, and this fermented for about 18 hours at room temperature. And they are the same quantity, so you can see how much gas production this one had overnight. Okay, you should be able to see a lot of bubbles. And then it has the sort of a jello-y consistency. Okay, here's how to mix the final dough. I have my water in my bowl and scaling my starter into my warm water. I'm using most of the levain that I prepared, and there's a little bit left in my container. So you can use this to refresh your starter and continue using for later baking. I'm breaking down the levain into the water first. Add my flour and salt. Mix until there's no lumps or dry flour in your bowl. You can also do this in a mixer with a hook attachment. Okay, check your dough temperature. You're shooting for somewhere around 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I have 78 degrees, that's good. And let it ferment for about 3 hours at room temperature in a warm place. Okay, this is 1 hour into the first fermentation time, and it's time for the first fold. I'm going to wet my hand a little bit and then scoop the dough from the side, give it a stretch, and fold it to the center. I'm going to do this 4 times. And there's not much gas production happening quite yet, but one thing that you should notice at this point is that the dough is getting smoother, and you can see that it forms a little bit thinner membrane here. So this shows that the gluten is starting to connect and creating the structure. Okay, and cover your bowl again, and then we will leave it out for another hour before the next fold. This is the same way as the first fold, using a wet hand, stretch from all 4 sides. Let it rest for 1 more hour. After 3 hours of bulk fermentation time, the dough is ready to divide. But before dividing, you want to make sure that the dough has some strength, it has some elasticity, the gas bubble is coming up to the surface, it feels fluffier than before, then it's ready to divide. Now I'm going to use a wet hand and a scraper to divide and pre-shape. Okay, so first I will scrape the side of the bowl. Again, I wet the surface of the scraper so that way it doesn't stick. And on the tabletop, you can keep this dry. Pour your dough out onto the surface. Oops. So I will cut in half. And using the flat side of the scraper that's facing against the table, I'm going to round. Stretching the top surface that is smooth, and tucking the skin underneath to create some tension. Okay, so I'm using the scraper straight side facing down, rounding in and coming towards myself. And you notice that my left hand is catching the dough here, so that way I can pull out my scraper. Turn my dough and do the same. So this Repeat this motion and you can see that the skin of your loaf stretches and gets some tension. Cover the dough lightly and then let the dough rest for about 20 minutes. These dough are ready for final shape. I'm going to prepare my baskets first. So you can use either the linen lined baskets or coiled baskets with some fabric lined inside. Put a little bit of dusting flour inside. That's the top with some flour. And on your workspace too, a little bit of dusting flour. And release the dough from the bottom. And place seam side facing up. And you can stretch the side, bring it to the center. Same from top and the bottom. Bring the corners in. Okay, so that's gonna be your bottom. Flip upside down and very gently stretch the skin. I'm cupping my hand at the back of the loaf and bringing it forward, sort of tucking the skin underneath to stretch the skin on top. And place your loaf seam side up into your proofing basket. Okay, and let these sit out at room temperature for about 30 minutes to an hour before placing them in the refrigerator. Okay, after final shaping, your loaves are ready to go to the refrigerator once it looks like this. So what I'm looking for is a little bit of gassiness, the volume expanded slightly. And I'm going to cover this up and place in the refrigerator overnight. Okay, so this is my loaf that retarded overnight in the fridge. And I usually leave my dough out at room temperature for about 30 minutes to an hour before baking. For baking, I need some parchment paper, lamb to score, and I have my oven preheated at 510 degrees with my Dutch oven preheating with the oven. Okay, first I'm going to take the dough out of the basket onto the parchment paper. Okay, score it in a crosshatch pattern. Pick up your loaf from the parchment paper, place it into hot Dutch oven, place the lid back on, get back into the oven. And we will check back in 20 minutes. Let's check the color. Okay, now the volume is good. I want to keep baking, so I'll take the loaf out of the pan. You can see the bottom is browning pretty fast. So remove it from the Dutch oven and place the loaf directly onto the top rack. And keep baking for at least 20 more minutes.